yelling and screaming.
My mom's half Irish. I'm a little bit of both.
And the British are even worse generally than the.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, we're talking about growing up and growing up in different
Irish,
households.
Italian.
The my Irish English household where people kind of kept their feelings to themselves somewhat, whereas Italian households grew up. People were much more open with their feelings.
That's right.
But you had a question for Tom.
Oh, well, yes. First, I'd like to ask you what brought you to become part of the Connecticut Citizen Action Group. What attracted you?
So I guess that might be a bit of a longer story in terms of I grew up in a.
That's great.
In a conservative, in some ways, but politically active family. I remember being dragged to a Spiro Agnew rally in 1972. And
How
being
old
dragged. That's a good way of asking how old are you. I was 11 at the time, I believe. And but within that, we were also, my family was active in the local Catholic Church, and some of the social justice teachings of the church resonated with me. And then my father had been a small business owner, and with the advent of the malls and everything, he and his brother's business was forced to go out of business. So then he had a number of times where he was unemployed in a number of situations, and my mother was our primary breadwinner as a school teacher. She went back when I was in 4th grade. And so there was a bit, probably more anger and stuff as I was dealing with at the time. And I ended up going to school up in by the Adirondacks, and we had the issue of acid rain, and we had tuition fights, and there was the anti-apartheid movement, and next thing you knew, I was this student activist that was elected president of the U.S. Student Association, and then went from there to, in response to the Reagan youth movement, started a nonprofit called Youth Action that helped to engage younger people both in their own organizations but also in primarily adult organizations, and I was introduced to all these great organizing and all. So my father was sick again, and I went back to help and was helping to put together a project in Albany, New York, and I was asked to come in for an interview with the CCAG, which I knew of at the time. And they had 20 people around the room, diverse labor, community, staff, board, all these people who really cared a lot about it. I had no intention on taking the job, but I was doing it out of respect to the people that had asked. So it was a 2.5-hour discussion, because it wasn't just an interview. And I walked out, and the first thing was, wow, that was a great discussion. And then the second thing was, oh, crap, they're going to offer you the job. What are you going to do, I had just gotten back to New York and was looking forward to living in Albany with a lot of friends and, really trying to figure out how to make a difference in New York. And 20 years later, they still have me in the witness relocation program here. No, I'm kidding.
We've all been to job interviews like that, where we're thinking to ourselves, I'm going to this, but I really have extremely mixed feelings about whether this is what I really want to do going forward for any length of time. And I guess they tweaked you enough with their questions and with the conversation. It sounds like that you became interested in something that you didn't think you'd be interested in.
Wow. So it changed the entire path of your life.
Yes. And I think it was, most days, I think it was a good change. I'm still hopeful that the board feels that way, too.
Wow.
So there are good days and bad days, like with anything, when you're working toward goal, or in the case of CCAG, goals in all these different variety of areas in Connecticut. There are days where you feel like maybe you moved the political quotient a tiny bit in the right direction, and then there's probably some days where you feel like it kind of pushed back on you.
Yeah, I mean, social change is not a straight line. I think Dr. King said, the arc of history, bends towards justice in some way or another, and that's a good thing to keep in mind. There is no doubt in my mind that CCAG has played a good role in helping to make Connecticut a more enlightened and better state to live. Whether it was passing, what at the time was the nation's best campaign finance system in the country, to helping to recruit and freeing me up to help run Ned Lamont's campaign against Joe Lieberman because of the war, to us being amongst the leaders nationally on implementing Obamacare and trying to set up the next phases of the fight here in Connecticut to guarantee that it stays affordable and that it's quality care that people are gaining access to. So, I mean, we lose our share of fights, but if you're not engaged in them at all, then it doesn't really,
Maybe you're not fighting enough fights or tough enough fights if you always win. Maybe you're not striving for more unreachable goals, and maybe sometimes you get a part of the way there, because I think I look back over my life and I'm seeing kind of that I think the world's a better place in a lot of ways. I think America's a better place in a lot of ways. I mean, we've got I think the educational system is probably a lot better. I think blacks and whites and other groups probably are more engaged one with the other than they were when I was little. So in a lot of ways, it's better, but like you say, there's a lot of stumbles along the way. There's a lot of the tide goes out and the tide comes in. Hopefully, at the end of the decade, you've made a little bit of progress forward. But it's rough going, and I can sense that in your answer that there have been a lot of rough spots along the way.
As a nonprofit that understands the need to, in order to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs.
Yeah.
And ticking people off, it's sometimes can be a challenge to keep the lights on. Having said that, we've got over 20,000 dues-paying members across the state that help to sustain us in really big ways, both through their active involvement, but also finances. So,
what kind of monetary skin do people put in the game to get it involved? Is it what would the dues be to belong to CCAG?
Well, we say that the baseline is $36 for an individual, $60 for a family. But if you can't afford that, there's a sliding scale.
Okay.
And then if people can afford more, we ask them to give more. Okay. It's something we haven't been bashful in asking. There's more diverse ways for people now to give. They've gone through some difficult times financially. Traditionally, we've utilized a lot door-to-door canvas where we might not have made money, but then we could have recouped that with people on the phone afterwards.
Yep.
People now have caller ID. They don't have as many landlines. You can't call their cell phones. That whole model is in a state of flux.
Yeah.
Right.
People are being more successful raising online money. We haven't been as good at that as some other groups because we've had all of the other work that we've done. But again, we have house parties, we do some online solicitation, we have our phone canvas, we have our events, we do whatever we can do to we do some grant writing, we raise money from allies in order to try to develop the type of a budget that we think we can undertake these issue campaigns that push the envelope but aren't tilting at windmills, shall we say. Although we'll tilt if need be.
And do you find that being a proponent of change, do you find that there's a reaction sometimes, like if you do something that might upset people, that people will, throw bricks in your windows or like back in the time with Martin
Please
Luther King,
don't give him any.
I'm sorry. I'm just saying because my father, he speaks out a lot about healthcare. We always joke that if he rocks the boat too much, people are going to react, and
we have not had any bricks or physical harm to our main headquarters. There have been graffiti incidents or whatever over time with satellite offices, but there's definitely a lot of people who strongly dislike us and detest what we stand for. I mean, we have pushed successfully policies that remember once there was a lobbyist for the tobacco insurance company in the Connecticut Business and Industry Association. We did an action at the Capitol showing with a human billboard, because there was a state report that said the state had saved $7.7 billion over the next 10 years if we shifted to single-payer health care and everybody was covered. So we had all the sevens and the zeros and the commas lined up, and we had to negotiate with the police how to do it. And somebody who was at the event went up to the 5th floor in the legislative office building and dumped a bunch of fake money that was saying not nice things about Joe Lieberman, who even deserved it back in 1994. And they were floating down. And the lobbyist turned to another lobbyist as I was standing there and said, CCAG, 7.7 billion pests. And that was a reminder that, when you do push the envelope, you do tick people off.
Yeah. We need that every once in a while.
Little pushback is a good thing, because it shows you that people are listening.
Right. And it shows that you are making some kind of a change, what's needed.
What was Gandhi's quote? First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win.
Yeah.
That's a pretty reasonable, at least that's how it pretty much worked out for him, and probably for Dr. King also. It takes a lot of, you have to put a lot of your heart into something.
Yeah.
To accomplish something. Nothing's easy. Nothing's easy. Now, Roberto, who's directing the show, wanted me to ask you exactly how do people contact CCAG in order to find out more about it? That's important that we bring that up.
Thank you. So our webpage is www.ccag.net. And at that time, that would take you to our Facebook page, but that would have all of our contact information. So if I can do it again, it's ccag.net.
ccag.net. Okay, make a note of that.
And that's probably the most simple way for people to try to track us now.
Okay. Now that people have gotten involved, let's say someone gets involved and they say, like a lot of people, $36 sometimes isn't very much money to reach in their pocket, and like when you're given to public television or public radio or something, all right, $36, sure. What do you want from people? What is the next thing that they need to do after they make that donation? How do you get them further engaged beyond the money?
So that's a great question, and we try to provide as many opportunities around that as possible. So there may be training that we do on organizing or political skills. There may be an event that we host. There may be a lobby day that we're a part of at the Capitol.
Okay.
There may be a political campaign that we encourage people to volunteer on, or another campaign. Or one of the things that, when we haven't been on camera, we've talked about here is, we'll help with other mobilizations. And this coming week is a big one for all of us. And that's the Climate March.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And for me, that's a burning passion at this point in time, is that we deal with climate change. We were joking earlier how I had my first child, I became a father on the same year I got my ARP card. So it's like I'm a little more advanced.
More of that going on than you could imagine.
But the idea that the Koch brothers and others could be keeping us from really addressing the issues pertaining to climate change just because of their money and the size of their wallets means that I would do almost anything on behalf of the future generations in order to push back on that and this is an area you talk about the difficulty of fights and it struggles along the way and are you being successful or not. This is one place similar to the movements you've talked about with Gandhi or King or whatever. I think we're going to fight, we're going to fight, we're going to fight, and one day we're going to wake up and we're going to have won. And we're probably not going to know when and where that exactly happened, but it's going to become, we need it to rise to a movement proportion as opposed to just a campaign.
It's a tough battle, and I run into a lot of people, and it seems like the thing you hear most from people that are opponents of the notion of climate change is, well, I woke up yesterday morning and it was 50 degrees out. Well, there you go, no climate change. Or some guy out in Arizona says, well, this happened, or somebody out in California said, well, this happened. All these personal blips on the radar, and they're thinking big based on that. But what part of these folks don't understand about the word global?
So what do you say to them? What do you say to these folks that say that to David or to us?
That there doesn't seem to be a change in the climate?
Yeah, it was.
Well, maybe
the other day it was 50 degrees out in the morning.
Right.
Well, what do you mean climate change? Well, how can you say it's climate change when it was 50 in Bethel the other day?
Well, I mean, in other parts of the world now, they're saying that icebergs are melting or glaciers are melting, and that it's affecting other parts of the world that might not hear immediately, but if you look at other parts, there is change.
So maybe a good response is, what part of global don't you understand?
Right.
Because I guess when you look at the big picture, the little if you microcosm it down to what happened in Bethel yesterday, or what happened in there haven't been any hurricanes this year, so how can there be climate change?
Right. Or they're saying, in Venice, pretty soon Venice is going to be underwater. I mean, I'm sure there are things happening and glaciers melting and polar bears not having homes anymore. I mean, it could be happening in other parts of the world.
I forgot about the ship that got stuck in the ice in the Antarctic last winter.
No, I don't know.
Yeah, that was a big thing.
So it might not be affecting Bethel, but maybe some other part of the world.
Oh yeah, that was proof, a ship getting stuck in the ice, and of course it was a ship filled with climate change scientists. So all the better.
Right. I mean, I think that we've all got to get a little bit better at this, but we've also got one of the things I like about the climate march this coming Sunday in New York City is the fact that part of the message is about disrupting, right? It's disrupt climate change. We want to stop climate change because it's being very disruptive to the planet. So I think we're going to see a more aggressive, more direct action. But I mean, we are now seeing the storm of the century every 10 years.
Right.
We're seeing a record drought in California. What's that going to do to your food prices and your food control? We do see the types of swings where it's going to be colder, and it's they've gone back to the word. They're now they mocked global warming in response to what you were saying, 50, and now climate change. You're saying, climate change is all the time. Look at the dinosaurs. Well, do we really want to do that to ourselves in terms of we're a little bit more thinking?
Right.
And we've got to be calling out. There are people that are profiting from destroying this planet, and we've got to be taking the profit out of that. Part of it is building that positive alternative with renewable energy. And in Connecticut, we've got to invest a lot more in conservation around that, since we don't have all the best energy sources. And then we've got to really tax and charge the maximum amount for carbons. We've got to make it more profitable for people to invest in protecting and the earth, as opposed to just destroying it.
Well, I know that in Europe, when they have the G8 meetings, I mean, Europe and other countries, they do stuff to protect the environment, but America, they just allow whatever to be put into the, toxins, whatever they want to be put into the environment. It's more of a cowboy
kind of attitude in this country, it seems like. More of a,
and that's why
whatever is good for me is good for me, and screw everybody else kind of an attitude.
So maybe they might not look too highly on, our attitudes towards the environment, whereas stuff they won't even allow, like putting fluorocarbons into the air, and
Well, actually, the CFC, the fluorocarbons that they stopped putting in aerosols, quite a long time ago, 30 or 40 years ago, I think. You're seeing the ozone layer rebuilding itself. So these things are, if you catch them in time, you do have good possibility going forward of the earth, of the what's above us repairing itself gradually.
Or what about food and pesticides, and that's another thing
that
too.
Was
another
we
big issue.
That was a big battle we won, and good things came of it.
Right, and the woman who helped to lead the charge, GMO labeling here within the state, is running for state rep down in the Fairfield area at this time, and that's really exciting to see her taking it to another level where Connecticut was in the lead on doing something like that. We were not successful this past year at banning fracking waste from coming into the state. We have a moratorium. We have 3 years to organize on that. But you talk about the cowboy mentality. Can you believe that Texas is better at forcing the companies to disclose what chemicals they use in their fracking process than Pennsylvania?
Interesting. I know Pennsylvania has had some serious problems. So Texas has actually addressed it more aggressively?
Yeah, I'm not saying adequately. I'm saying that it was more aggressive than Pennsylvania. But within it, where you, how we look at it and how other folks look at us, I think you raised a really good point about other countries saying, well, why should we address climate change if you're not going to do anything? And we
said the same thing about the Chinese. Well, the Chinese are polluting worse than us, so why should we lose our competitive advantage over them by doing something if they're not going to do it?
That's been more recently that they've exceeded us in terms of the amount, and when you look at the population differences, this isn't, you pointed out global, this isn't about they're bad so we should be bad. The United States has been in the lead about trying to show what a multi-ethnic democracy could look like. We should be in the lead in talking about what an economy that is sustainable looks like, that deals with everybody in a positive way.
We should be,
And we need, I think at this time, we need to really redouble our efforts and organize in order to build a type of model future society, because the alternative is really, really messed up. And I showed you pictures before. I'll do a lot for that little girl. And when it comes to climate change, I'll do just about anything.
The future is about our children and grandchildren, and even the great-grandchildren and great-great-children that we haven't even begun to think about. We want the Earth to be around we want people to be on Earth for millions more years.
And I guess the corporations, who are the ones polluting the environment, they just probably think about the present, the moment, making money. They don't think about future generations or what might happen when they're not here anymore.
They're doing exactly what they criticized us for back in the 60s. Live for today. And that's kind of what they're doing. And now we've grown up, and we want to set up our future generations for having the opportunities and the healthy planet that we've had. And
even more healthy. I mean, you talked about CFCs. I talked earlier about acid rain. We know that when we put our mind to something, we can do it. It's just right now that I would say these greedy SOBs who are trying to usurp both our democracy and destroy our planet to maximize the amount of money that they have. And, the Koch brothers political directors, there was a tape last week that said, minimum wage is a slippery slope to fascism, right?
Right,
And
exactly.
these are the folks.
Yeah.
These are the folks that are leading the climate denial and all of that charge. And I think we've really got to call them out, and we've got to we owe it to each other and everybody else to beat them, and to beat them decisively when it comes to this climate change fight.
Right. No, I know. There's a lot of...
Just a quick note on the Koch brothers, because they have an organization, and I've forgotten the name of it, you probably can think of it, that meets with legislators in different states, and it's almost exclusively a Republican thing. And I know in Connecticut, the folks that they're in touch with in providing, suggesting bills to put before the legislature in Connecticut are they have these getaways for the legislators, and then they give them a little push toward advocating bills that benefit them, meaning the Koch brothers and their businesses. But it seems like we need to make in our campaigns this year more of a point to connect the dots between those candidates that are being financed and advocated and partied by the Koch brothers than maybe we have.
It's the American Legislative Exchange Council.
Alex, that's the American Legislative. Yeah.
So finally, I got one, and you didn't.
Thank you.
But we did that. I think you're right that where their model legislation is included, that we can utilize it to our advantage. And there's an example. There was the last couple of years, AT&T was pushing bad telephone and internet deregulation bills that would have eliminated the ability of the state to demand universal access, any type of regulation over, pricing or cost. Was going to give them free rein, and they were trying to proactively do it with the voice over internet protocol, which is VoIP.
There are groups out there that are trying to flip that around that I noticed on some ad somewhere the other day.
Net neutrality.
Yeah, that in order to protect net neutrality, you had to keep it out of the hands of government. You don't want government having control over the internet the way the same model as they had control over other things in past decades. And
that's probably exactly a whole nother show with NSA and the eavesdropping and everything.
Oh my God, yes.
You could spend at least 30 minutes on that. They may have some valid points within that, but at the same time, the companies, we need to check over these companies.
Okay, and with that, we're going to have to check off our second show. It's been Progressive Soup. I'm David Stevenson, co-host Emily Volpentesta, and Tom Swan of the Connecticut Citizen Action Group, ccag.net.
Net. Yes. Thanks for being on our show.
Thank you very much for joining us. Nice to have you.